Most people read Machiavelli as if he were simply giving instructions to rulers, as if every sentence were meant to be taken at face value. But if you sit with his words long enough, you start to feel something else moving beneath the surface. There's a second voice, there quieter, sharper, layered with a meaning he never intended the ordinary reader to notice. He lived in a world where honesty could get a man exiled, tortured, or erased, so he learned to write in shadows. He spoke to power in a language power understood, yet hid the rest between pauses, metaphors, and convenient omissions. The surface of his writing is polished, even diplomatic, but the deeper message has the cold precision of someone who had seen too much. When you read him this way, every chapter feels like a doorway into a restricted room. The official explanation sits neatly in front of you, but something unspoken stands behind it, watching. You sense that he's guiding you toward a truth he couldn't express directly, a truth that would have been dangerous to spell out in a world built on fragile egos and unstable alliances. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The tone shifts. The gaps matter as much as the sentences. You realize that Machiavelli wasn't just advising princes, he was revealing the hidden rules that govern human behavior. He disguised these insights as political strategy, but their reach extends far beyond courts and kingdoms. They aim straight at the forces that quietly move people. He wrote for readers willing to keep their senses awake. Those who know truth rarely speaks openly. It waits behind the curtain, offering fragments to anyone perceptive enough to notice. Entering his world feels less like reading and more like unlocking layer of reality. Machiavelli didn't write in a vacuum. He wrote in a world where a single wrong sentence could cost a man everything. His life had already shown him how quickly favor turns to danger, how a shift in power could turn yesterday's advisor into today's prisoner. So when he put ink to paper, every word carried the weight of survival. He understood that truth, when spoken too directly, can be more threatening than any weapon. The people in power didn't fear enemies as much as they feared ideas that exposed their weaknesses. This is why his writing feels controlled, almost too deliberate. He wasn't careless. He wasn't reckless. He shaped his ideas like a man threading a needle through a maze of watching eyes. The sharper his insight, the softer he wrapped it. The more volatile the truth, the quieter he delivered it. He had to leave space between the lines, a place where he could speak freely without inviting the consequences of clarity. It's in that space, silent, narrow, and intentional, where his real thoughts lived. When you read him with this in mind, a new tension appears. You feel him holding back, choosing caution over confession. You sense that there was a deeper layer of understanding he couldn't risk revealing openly. His direct advice was practical, but the truths he kept veiled were far more unsettling. They were truths about the nature of people, the instability of loyalty, and the hidden machinery of ambition. This gap between what he wrote and what he believed creates a quiet pull. It makes you wonder which parts were strategy and which parts were self. It invites you to search for the version of Mac that only appears when you read slowly enough to hear the thoughts he wasn't allowed to speak aloud. The most unsettling part of Machiavelli's work isn't that he hid his truth intentionally. It's that most people never noticed it, even when it was right in front of them. His darkest insight wasn't buried in coded messages or secret passages. It was hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to look past the comfortable interpretations. People read his words and focus on the tactics, the strategies, the political maneuvering, but they overlook the deeper message staring back at them. The world behaves according to rules most refuse to acknowledge. This kind of truth doesn't stay hidden because it's complicated. It stays hidden because people prefer illusions. They want to believe loyalty is stable, that intentions are pure, that power is good when held by the right hands. Machiavelli understood that these beliefs make life feel safer, but they also make people blind to what drives human behavior beneath the surface. He never needed to disguise his real message behind riddles. Human nature did the work for him. People filtered out the parts that made them uncomfortable and clung to the parts that kept their worldview intact. When you read him without those filters, the entire landscape shifts. Sentences you once skimmed become warnings. Observations that seemed harsh start to feel accurate. You begin to sense the presence of a truth most people walk right past without recognizing it. And in that moment, something in you sharpens. You feel a pull to keep going, to uncover what others fail to see, to step into the clarity that comes only when illusion finally cracks and reality stands unhidden. Every interaction you've ever had carries a current beneath it, a quiet exchange of leverage that most people never notice. Machiavelli understood understood this long before modern psychology tried to explain it. He saw that conversations, decisions, and even small gestures are shaped by an invisible balance of advantage. It isn't loud and it isn't hostile. It's simply the way humans move through the world. The moment two people meet, they begin reading each other, gauging confidence, need, certainty, desire. They decide what to reveal and what to withhold, what to push forward and what to retreat from. It's negotiation without the formality of negotiation. Once you begin to see this, everything looks different. A compliment becomes more than a compliment. A disagreement becomes a test of ground. Silence becomes a form of positioning. People don't usually do this consciously. They're driven by instincts built from years of wins, losses, fears, and learned roles. But those instincts guide them all the same. You can see it in workplaces where people compete without admitting they're competing. You can see it in relationships where affection and distance shift to maintain emotional balance. You can see it in friendships where influence moves quietly between who leads and who follows. The most surprising place this negotiation happens is within the self. You negotiate with your own doubts, your own ambitions, your own image of who you think you are. You weigh risks, rewards, and perceptions even when nobody is watching. Machiavelli's brilliance was recognizing that power isn't something exchanged only in formal setting. It's present in every moment where two wills meet. When you start viewing your life through this lens, you begin noticing patterns you once ignored. You realize how often you've given away leverage without meaning to, and how different everything feels once you understand the rules beneath the surface. People rarely admit they're pursuing advantage. It feels too revealing, too raw, too close to motives we prefer to cover with softer labels. So instead, they wrap their intentions in layers of morality, kindness, or social duty. Machiavelli noticed this long before the world became fluent in self-image. He saw that people hide their ambitions not because they are ashamed of them, but because honesty about desire makes others uncomfortable. It disrupts the illusion that everyone is driven by noble reasons. By masking their motives, people protect themselves while also appearing harmless. What makes this realization unsettling is how seamlessly the disguise blends into daily life. Someone offers help because it feels right, but the help builds a debt. Someone argues for fairness, yet the version of fairness they defend benefits them most. Someone shows generosity, though the timing aligns perfectly with when they need support. These actions aren't evil, they're human. They reflect a deep instinct to seek advantage without exposing the desire for it. The world rewards subtlety, not confession. Once you notice this pattern, you begin seeing how social rules create a stage where everyone performs goodness. Even when the script is written by some people, play roles that make sense to them. The protector, the loyal friend, the humble co-worker. But beneath the performance lies a simple truth. Every person is navigating toward what they believe keeps them safe, valued, or powerful. Recognizing this doesn't make the world darker. It makes it clearer. You stop expecting purity where it cannot exist, and you begin understanding the real mechanics behind behavior. It pushes you to question appearances, not out of suspicion, but out of awareness. And with that awareness comes a deeper curiosity about how much of life is shaped not by what people claim, but by what they quietly chase. Machiavelli believed people follow their own interests, even when they swear they're serving something greater. It isn't cynicism, it's observation. Anyone can claim loyalty, morality, or principle, but behavior reveals something more consistent. Individuals choose the path that aligns with their needs, fears, and desires. Sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. The mind is skilled at convincing itself that self-serving decisions are noble. This ability to disguise motive from oneself creates the illusion that people act out of pure intention. When you start examining actions rather than explanations, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. A person stands by you when it benefits them, then drifts when it doesn't. Another fights passionately for a cause, yet their passion always seems to mirror their personal stake. Someone insists they're being honest, but their honesty appears only when it protects their image. These contradictions aren't flaws. They're the natural outcomes of people trying to survive a world that rewards advantage. Seeing this clearly can feel destabilizing at first. It challenges the assumptions you've built your beliefs on, but very quickly that discomfort shifts into clarity. The fog lifts. You recognize that understanding self-interest isn't about becoming suspicious. It's about stepping into a vantage point where behavior finally makes sense. You stop misreading people. You stop expecting consistency. they cannot provide. You start seeing patterns where confusion used to be. This understanding doesn't make you detached from others. It makes you grounded within yourself. It lets you navigate relationships and environments with a steadier mind, because you're no longer surprised by human nature. You're studying it from a higher place, where the rules become visible and the noise starts to fade. Machiavelli understood something most people prefer not to face. Loyalty is never a fixed state. It shifts quietly with needs, fears, pressures, and changing circumstances. Someone may stand beside you with absolute conviction one day, then drift away the moment life pulls their emotions in a different direction. This isn't betrayal in the dramatic sense, since simply the nature of human attachment. People pledge loyalty based on how they feel, what they want, and what they believe serves them best in that moment. And because those elements are always changing, their loyalty moves with them. Seeing this clearly creates a strange mix of calm and cold clarity. You stop expecting anyone to remain exactly who they were. You stop assuming that promises made in one season will survive the next. You begin to recognize that even the most confident expressions of devotion are tied to invisible conditions people rarely articulate. They hold on when it feels right, and they loosen when their inner world pulls them elsewhere. This perspective doesn't make relationships meaningless. It simply reveals the instability built into human nature. People are more fluid than their words suggest. They shift roles, priorities, and alliances because their own needs shift first. When you understand this, you stop being surprised when someone changes direction. You start seeing the movement as natural rather than personal, and in that space, you gain a quiet advantage. The ability to read loyalty not as a guarantee, but as a state that requires awareness instead of assumption. People stay loyal as long as your presence supports the version of life they want to maintain. Machiavelli saw that loyalty is rarely about you, it's about the alignment between their interests and your existence. When that alignment holds, people appear dependable, steady, even deeply committed. But when their needs evolve or collide with yours, their devotion softens, not out of malice, but out of instinct. They move toward what feels safest, most rewarding, or least conflicting. Loyalty, in this sense, becomes conditional, shaped by invisible calculations people often make without realizing it. Understanding this creates a subtle detachment in the mind. You stop confusing someone's warmth for permanence. You stop mistaking consistency for unconditional commitment. Instead, you start observing the quiet link between what someone wants and how they treat you. You see how their support grows when you fit their path and fades when you don't. This awareness strengthens your inner world. It prevents you from collapsing emotionally when someone's loyalty shifts, because you no longer view it as a collapse, just a realignment. This perspective pushes you toward strategy rather than blind trust. You learn to evaluate relationships by the stability of interests, not the strength of promises. You begin to understand why some people stay loyal longer than others. The alignment remains intact, and you accept why others drift away. The alignment breaks. With this clarity, you start engaging with people more intentionally, not harder, not colder, just smarter. You rely on your understanding of human nature rather than hoping loyalty will hold simply because it once did. Machiavelli didn't view the instability of loyalty as a reason to become bitter. He saw it as a way to navigate people without illusions. By accepting that loyalty shifts, he freed himself from the emotional weight that comes from expecting permanence in a world built on change. Instead of demanding unwavering devotion, he watched how circumstances influenced behavior. Instead of resenting people for protecting their interests, he anticipated it and moved accordingly. This allowed him to operate with a kind of mental stability that others lacked. When you adopt this perspective, something similar happens inside you. The actions of others begin to feel less personal. You stop interpreting distance as rejection. You stop viewing change as betrayal. You recognize that people follow their inner currents, and those currents rarely remain still. This understanding gives you a grounded sense of power, because you're no longer fighting the natural patterns of human behavior. You're reading them, adjusting to them, and navigating them with clarity. This isn't detachment in the cold or isolating sense. It's a form of emotional freedom. You can connect deeply while still seeing clearly. You can value people without expecting them to defy their nature. Instead of holding resentment when loyalty fades, you shift your attention to alignment, timing, and incentives. You move through relationships with awareness rather than disappointment. By seeing loyalty as fluid, you gain control over how you respond to it. And with that control comes the quiet empowerment judgment that Machiavelli himself used not to dominate others, but to remain steady in a world where few things stay the same. Machiavelli understood that power never sits still. It moves the way shadows move, quietly, gradually, and often without anyone noticing, until the shape of everything has already changed. People imagine power as something solid, something earned or taken, then held. But in reality, it's a current that rises and falls depending on timing, perception, alliances, and shifting needs. A person can seem influential one day and irrelevant the next, not because they changed, but because the forces around them shifted. When you start seeing power this way, the world takes on a new depth. You notice how outcomes are shaped long before they become visible. A conversation held in private influences, a decision announced weeks later. A small gesture alters trust more than a dramatic speech. A quiet loss of respect weakens authority before anyone openly challenges it. These are the moments where true power moves out of sight, under the surface, carried by subtle signals people miss when they only focus on loud events. Recognizing this brings a calm clarity. You stop being surprised when someone rises unexpectedly or falls without warning. You stop assuming that titles or status reflect real influence. You begin paying attention to the undercurrents instead. Who listens to whom? Who hesitates? Who adapts? Who gets ignored? Machiavelli's world was filled with shifting loyalties and fragile hierarchies, but the patterns are the same today. Power isn't what someone claims, it's what others quietly allow. And the moment you start reading those invisible movements, you begin to see the landscape the way he saw it. Manipulation rarely arrives wearing the face people expect. It doesn't announce itself or move with obvious intent. More often, it appears as guidance, concern, or friendly advice. Machiavelli understood how easily influence can hide inside gestures that seem harmless. A person says they're only trying to help, yet their help nudges you toward a path that benefits them. Someone offers wisdom, but their wisdom subtly shifts your choices to align with their desires. Manipulation becomes most effective when it feels like support. Once you recognize this, the world becomes sharper. You begin noticing how people frame their suggestions, what they emphasize, and what they conveniently leave out. You see how they shape your perception of options before you've even made a decision. None of this happens aggressively. It happens gently through tone, timing, and selective information. These methods work because they bypass resistance. People lower their guard when influence is wrapped in warmth. Understanding this doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you aware. You realize that not every gesture of concern is neutral. You start questioning why someone wants you to choose a certain direction. You observe how people position themselves as protectors while steering outcomes quietly in their favor. This awareness strengthens you. It prevents you from being pulled by invisible threads you never agreed to. Machiavelli knew the most dangerous manipulations were the ones that felt like guidance. When you learn to see them, your psychological radar sharpens, and the world becomes easier to navigate. Machiavelli's deepest insight into influence was simple. People respond more to perception than to action. He realized that controlling how others see you often creates more power than trying to control what they do. When someone views you as confident, they defer. When they see you as competent, they trust. When they believe you're unpredictable, they tread carefully. These perceptions shape behavior long before you say or do anything. Influence begins in the mind of the observer. This understanding changes the way you move through the world. Instead of trying to force outcomes, you begin shaping the impressions you create. You pay attention to the signals you send, the tone you carry, the certainty you project. You recognize that small adjustments in your presence can shift how people interpret your intentions, your strength, and your boundaries. You no longer waste energy trying to control external situations directly, because you understand the true leverage lies in how others frame you internally. This perspective builds a steady sense of mastery. You start noticing how people rise or fall based on the perceptions they create without realizing it. Some lose influence because they appear uncertain. Others gain it simply by seeming unbothered. Machiavelli saw that power flows naturally toward those who manage perception with intention. When you adopt this mindset, you move with a quieter confidence. You stop relying on force and start relying on awareness. And in that shift, you discover the subtle truth he understood all along. Perception is the hidden engine behind human behavior, and those who shape it hold far more power than those who chase control through action alone. Machiavelli believed that the most dangerous threat a person faces isn't found in rival kingdoms, scheming advisors, or sudden betrayals. It's the turbulence inside. Fear that clouds judgment, desire that overrides logic, ego that blinds reasoning, attachment that demands loyalty where none is safe. These are the enemies that can undo even the most calculated plan, the silent forces that make a man predictable when he should be strategic. They are invisible to others, but lethal to the self. A person who cannot command their own impulses will stumble before external threats even arise. Understanding this shifts the focus inward. Power isn't something someone else gives. It's something cultivated quietly in the still spaces of thought, in the discipline to pause, reflect, and resist impulses. Each emotion that flares unchecked is an opportunity for vulnerability. Each attachment unexamined is a thread someone else could tug. Machiavelli's insight was that mastery begins here, in the mind, where raw human nature resides, where illusions of control often mask chaos. This perspective doesn't feel comforting. It feels clarifying. You start noticing how often fear drives choices that appear logical, how desire misleads judgment, how pride invites mistakes. Recognizing these patterns allows you to anticipate the self's weaknesses before they become crises. It invites a calm, controlled introspection, the kind that sharpens decisions and prepares the mind for challenges without panic or distraction. In this quiet vigilance, the viewer steps into a realm of introspective power, a space where the turbulence of others matters far less than the discipline of the self. Self-control is the foundation of clarity. Machiavelli observed that when emotions are tamed, the mind can perceive reality without distortion. Fear ceases to exaggerate threats. Desire stops obscuring choices. Ego no longer dictates responses. When a person can step back from the pull of impulses, they see people, situations, and opportunities as they truly aren't, as colored by wish or dread. This is where strategy emerges naturally, not from force, but from clear perception. Emotional detachment doesn't mean coldness. It means the ability to act from observation rather than reaction. Decisions are no longer hurried by panic or blinded by longing. The world becomes legible in its patterns, allowing calculated movement through events that once felt unpredictable. Machiavelli recognized that most failures arise not from enemies' schemes, but from internal Those who master themselves can anticipate outcomes before the chaos of human behavior fully unfolds. This detachment elevates the mind to a state of strategic untouchability. Others may rage, flatter, or manipulate, yet the self remains steady. Actions are deliberate. Responses are measured. You begin to notice how subtle changes in perception can shift influence without confrontation. This inner steadiness allows you to act in ways that feel effortless yet precise, because your decisions are no longer reactions to external pressure, but expressions of calculated insight. In this space, the mind becomes a fortress, invulnerable not through dominance, but through understanding and control. The quiet strength that Machiavelli prized above all. The truth Machiavelli never wrote plainly is that mastery over others begins with mastery over oneself. A leader who cannot command internal impulses cannot command loyalty, trust, or respect. The mind that is scattered, reactive, or consumed by desire is transparent. It signals weakness long before external rivals act. To influence the world, the self must first be disciplined, calm, and aware. When the mind achieves this, influence becomes almost effortless. Decisions flow from observation, not impulse. Reactions are measured, and presence alone communicates control. Others feel it, adjust to it, and unconsciously align with it. This is the quiet engine behind authority, the ability to act from clarity rather than chaos. Machiavelli understood that this internal command is more powerful than armies, alliances, or schemes, because it shapes perception, timing, and behavior without resistance. This realization carries a sense of near mystical clarity. Power begins not outside, but within. Emotional mastery transforms vulnerability into strength and impulsiveness into foresight. It leaves the viewer with an elevated sense of self, a space where influence, confidence, and composure are inseparable. Understanding this allows a person to move through the world with calm authority, seeing both themselves and others with precision. In that clarity, the dark truth becomes illuminating. Control over the mind precedes control over the world, and everything else follows naturally. Machiavelli saw the world as a place in constant motion, where appearances were only a surface layer and intentions swirled beneath it. Every interaction, every decision, every alliance carried hidden motives, subtle calculations, and shifting desires. desired. Nothing was fixed. People were guided by self-interest, fear, hope, and habit, often unaware of the forces driving their own behavior. To step into his mind is to step into a realm where certainty is an illusion, and the patterns that govern outcomes are subtle, fluid, and invisible to the casual observer. When you begin to see through this lens, life transforms. Situations that once felt confusing become readable. You start noticing the invisible currents behind social gatherings, workplace dynamics, and personal relationships. Conversations are no longer just words. They are signals, tests, and positions in a larger game. Every gesture, pause, and expression begins to reveal intentions that others try to hide even from themselves. The world feels sharper, richer, and more intricate, yet it also feels navigable. The complexity isn't chaotic. It follows rules, just rules most people ignore. This perspective gives the mind a rare clarity. You begin to operate not from expectation, but from understanding. You recognize where influence gathers, where instability lurks, and where patience or decisiveness can alter outcomes. Stepping into Machiavelli's consciousness is not about cynicism, it's about awareness. The world doesn't have to surprise you anymore, because you've begun to see it the way he did: dynamic, unpredictable, and shaped by the hidden currents of human desire and strategy. Once you see the world through Machiavelli's eyes, fear loses its grip. Chaos no longer feels threatening, because you recognize the patterns behind what others call disorder. You see that events are rarely random. They are the outcomes of countless small actions, decisions, and reactions, each shaped by human motives that are predictable once understood. This knowledge allows the mind to remain steady, even in the midst of upheaval, because you no longer confuse appearances with reality. Navigating life this way builds a sense of stable inner authority. You stop reacting emotionally to every perceived threat. You stop overvaluing praise or fearing criticism. Instead, you observe, measure, and decide with calm precision. Every choice becomes an opportunity to position yourself advantageously, not through force, but through comprehension of what drives people and events. You begin to trust your judgment, not the assurances or promises of others, because your insight comes from understanding, not hope. This clarity brings a quiet confidence. You move through interactions without the agitation of expectation. You notice the motives guiding actions, the subtle shifts in attention or loyalty, and the signals that indicate opportunity or danger. The world may still surprise those unprepared, but for the one who sees it clearly, uncertainty becomes manageable. You act from knowledge, not reaction. In this space, authority is internal, grounded in awareness rather than external validation. Machiavelli's lens transforms the way you experience life, providing both clarity and freedom in a world where appearances can deceive. The ultimate lesson of Machiavelli's vision is that the dark truths he observed were never meant to corrupt, they were meant to awaken. Once illusions fall away, the world simplifies. You no longer rely on hope or assumption to guide you. Instead, you rely on understanding. Hidden motives, shifting loyalties, and subtle strategies no longer surprise you. They inform your decisions and deepen your insight. Awareness becomes the tool that replaces confusion, and clarity replaces fear. Seeing the world in this way cultivates a calm, deliberate strength. You interact with people without being misled by appearances. You anticipate shifts in power or favor without panic. You recognize opportunity where others see chaos. The patterns of human behavior become maps rather than obstacles, and each choice carries the weight of foresight. In this state, you are not controlling others. You are moving through the currents with awareness, adjusting your path with precision, and creating influence effortlessly because you understand the underlying structure of reality. This understanding leaves a lingering sense of quiet power. You realize that human behavior, while complex, is not incomprehensible. You see both yourself and others with a level of detachment that clarifies intention without diminishing empathy. The world feels sharper, yet simpler. Every interaction, every decision, every subtle signal can be interpreted and acted upon with clarity. Machiavelli's lessons do not harden the heart, they awaken the mind, and in that awakening, the viewer is left in a space of reflective calm, carrying the power of comprehension and the quiet authority that comes from seeing the world as it truly is.